We worked on a project that we are calling Motherhood and Rights, Leadership in the South African AIDS Crisis. So tonight I'll be talking a little bit about women's experiences battling HIV and AIDS in South Africa. And to start, I would like to just walk through a few statistics so that everyone can grasp the extent of the crisis that's going on currently in South Africa, because it's really important. So currently we see that worldwide, over 30 million individuals are living with HIV and AIDS, and over half of those individuals are women, about 60% are female. In South Africa alone, the country holds the fastest growing rate of HIV in the world, so really significant. And currently about 5.7 million adults are infected, and that's not including children. Almost 1 in 3 women between the ages of 25 and 29 are infected, and that was particularly significant to us because we were looking at motherhood, and that's a prime childbearing age. And in speaking of motherhood, mother-to-child transmission is actually one of the most common ways that people are infected in South Africa, and that can occur during pregnancy, childbirth, and even through breastfeeding. And that leads to anywhere between 15 to 30% of children becoming infected through mother-to-child transmission without immediate treatment, which most of them don't receive. And unfortunately, that leads to upwards of 70,000 children infected each year this way, and most of them won't survive without proper treatment that they can't receive. So clearly, this is an important crisis that's going on currently. South Africa is one of the most hard-hit countries in the world under the HIV/AIDS crisis. So it was important to look at this research. So in going into the research, I really didn't have much of a background on the topic, so it was really important to formulate some specific questions to guide my research. And so some of those I've included here. I was really interested in learning more about the feminization of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in South Africa. We just saw that women are disproportionately affected by the crisis, and I wanted to know more about specifically why that's happening in South Africa. Also wanted to learn more about these women's personal stories. Are they being heard? Do they have outlets to express their experiences with HIV and AIDS? So looking for those narratives was important. And then finally, what organizations are there in South Africa helping these women? What's being done to address these important issues? And I was particularly interested in the local level, the grassroots organizations that are in South Africa, not really the bigger international organizations. So with these questions in mind, I embarked on some very interesting research. Go ahead. So the most interesting way that I found the bulk of my research was actually going right to the source, was looking at women's personal narratives of their experiences battling HIV and AIDS in South Africa. And this was really important because it's these women actually talking from their own experience. It was really rich in detail, a lot of really disturbing stories, but also very inspiring about how these women are coping with their lives with HIV or AIDS. You can see some of the sources that I used to find those narratives. And then what I did was I categorized them based on reoccurring themes and topics that these women talked about. And one thing that I was really surprised to find was that despite how diverse the group of women was that I was looking at, they really did share quite a few similarities in their experiences. So obviously those are really important to learn more about because so many people are talking about them. So some of those key themes that I wanted to touch on are here, and of course I'd be happy to answer more questions about them more in depth later if you are interested. Some of the most common challenges that these women expressed in their narratives, one was gender-based violence, which occurs too commonly and also includes rape. Also poverty and economic dependence, so reliance on their husband for income. A lot of these women don't have adequate access to the labor market, and so they're economically dependent, which is a huge problem. And then finally, stigma and discrimination was also really common in these women's stories. Being marginalized for being HIV positive, even from their families and communities. So that was really sad, but was probably the most common story that I heard from these narratives. In addition to those challenges, these women also face problems from South African customary law. And that is essentially a strict code of social and cultural expectations. And unfortunately, customary law really gives men more power than women in almost every situation. And what it does is it justifies their abusive behavior in the name of tradition because customary law says it's okay. And that's especially detrimental to these women when that abusive behavior is putting them at further risk for infection. So that was really important to learn about through their stories. And after reading about all these challenges that the women are facing, it was also important to learn more about efforts that are being done to address these issues. And so I'm happy to say that I found a really exciting example of sort of a best practice that's going on in South Africa. And if you want to go to the next slide. And that is the Wolanani organization. And Wolanani is a local grassroots organization, and they have a particular focus on women and mothers. But they don't exclude men. There are men involved in the organization as well, which is particularly unique. And the Wolanani phrase actually translates to "we embrace and develop one another," which I think is really important because it really exemplifies their whole attitude and approach to addressing these women's needs. It's a really unique organization because it takes women as the whole individual. They're not just looking at them as mothers and only addressing their needs through their children, but it's really addressing all their needs. HIV/AIDS is not just a medical issue, right? It affects all aspects of these women's lives. And Wolanani does a really great job of approaching it through a holistic manner. So they have a number of programs in place. These are just some of them. And all this information can be found on their website. It's really interesting to read about. So some of the support and counseling programs that they have both individual counseling with a professional if someone has something private that they'd like to talk about. And they also have group counseling, which was really exciting to read about because the women actually were able to become empowered by hearing each other's stories and by sharing it with other people and seeing that they're not the only ones going through these problems. Wolanani also provides education and awareness programs. This includes sexual education classes, also information about HIV/AIDS because so many of these women don't actually know the facts about what they're dealing with. So that's really important as well. And also their rights as South African citizens. They teach them about all that, what their options are, where else they can go for help. Healthcare and treatment is really important also because a lot of these women, like I said, don't have the financial means to access it elsewhere. So that's really important. They also provide child care and services for their children under the healthcare and facilities programs. And then finally, skills and training was really interesting to read about. They actually provide skill development for these women and teach them marketable skills that they can go on and use in their futures. So things like making crafts, making jewelry, that they can then continue once they leave the Wolanani program, become self-sufficient and become economically independent, which is so important for so many of these women. So that was really fun to read about, and you can see some of the bowls that they make. And these things sell like crazy, and it's actually an international market. They promote it really well, and all the profits go to the women themselves. So I just really admire this cycle of empowerment that Wolanani provides to the women. It's women working with other women, and it also provides them really unique leadership opportunities. And it's really the first time that so many of these women are receiving these services, and so it's especially important that Wolanani provides such a safe, inclusive environment for these women to go to. And I'd like to end on a little bit of an uplifting note. I sort of told you about all these challenges women are facing, but it's also important to know that progress is being made, particularly through programs like Wolanani. And so this is a quote from a woman named Noma who entered Wolanani as a client, receiving their services, and then the program was so successful for her that she actually continued with them and became a project specialist. So like I was talking about leadership opportunities for these women, it's really unique. So Noma says, "Tomorrow at Wolanani, I will be with people who I can talk to and who will support me. I am happy now and I have accepted my HIV. Life is good and I am well. I think I am a role model." So I think that really just confirms that cycle of empowerment like I was talking about, and really shows us that these programs are working and that it is so important to continue to do this kind of research.